Do you think you have POTS? Do you know someone who has POTS? Maybe you already been diagnosed with POTS. This video is for you. In this video, I'm going to share with you what the heck is POTS, and no, it's not something you cook with. We're going to go through symptoms, how you get diagnosed, and what the treatments are. Hola amigos, Daniela here from Through the Looking Glass. Welcome back to my channel. In this channel, we talk about all things disability and life. Today, I want to talk to you about POTS. October is Dysautonomia International Month, and POTS is a kind of dysautonomia. Disclaimer, the information that I'm sharing with you today is based on my own research and it's for information only. I am not a doctor, I am not qualified to diagnose anybody or to recommend treatments. This information is just so that you have some knowledge so that you can approach your doctor and have a little bit more of an educated discussion. Now that all of this is out of the way, let's get into it. So what is POTS? POTS stands for Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome. It is a type of dysautonomia. Dysautonomia describes several medical conditions that cause malfunctioning of the autonomic nerve system. I'll get a little bit more into what that is in a moment. Bear with me. Dysautonomia affects 70 million people in the world, and POTS alone affects 3 million Americans. So POTS on itself refers to a specific group of symptoms that happen upon standing or changing position from a laying down to an upright position. It is defined by a heart rate increase from going from a sitting or laying down position to standing of 30 beats per minute in adults or 40 beats per minute in adolescents over a period of 10 minutes. So let's talk a little bit more about the autonomic nerve system. The autonomic nerve system is a network of nerves that connects your brain to your organs. It is mostly divided into two components. The sympathetic nerve system, also known as the fight or flight system, is a system where the body responds to danger, emergencies, or anything that requires the body to be in a more alert state. Then we have the parasympathetic system, which is pretty much the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. It is also known as the rest and digest, and is primarily responsible for the digestion and excretions such as bowels and kidneys. These systems are in balance in a healthy person. Throughout the day, you have small activations of the sympathetic nervous system and small activations of the parasympathetic nerve system. I have an idea. I'm just gonna get a prop to give you an explanation. Hold up. This will do. Can you see it? Maybe I should get a darker color pen. Hold up. Okay, I think you can see that a little bit better. All right, so let's do a little demonstration here. So imagine this as a balance. Over here, we have the sympathetic nervous system, and over here, we have the parasympathetic nerve system. So it is mostly in balance, but things, for example, digestion or the body needing to excrete toxins will sort of like increase your... Was this the sympathetic and this the parasympathetic? Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's do a graph here. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. You eat something, you get an increase in parasympathetic. That in turn suppresses the sympathetic. So let's say you got some bad news, or you got scared, or you drank some caffeine, then there is an increase in the sympathetic nerve system. And what that means is that the body is going to be diverting blood flow to the brain and to the muscles, because those are primarily involved with survival. You need to think fast and you need to run fast. So it's a very primal reflex that we have in our body. So if you're out in the woods and you see a bear, you need to think fast what you're going to do, and you need to be able to run fast. So therefore, you get this increase in sympathetic nerve system, which makes your heart pump faster. It diverts the blood to the brain and to the muscles. Of course, digestion is not important if you are at danger. So the parasympathetic is down. After that initial sort of rush of adrenaline happens, then the body kind of regains balance. Other things that can activate that sympathetic nerve system is outside stimuli such as temperature and also gravity. So when you stand up, the gravity brings your blood to your lower extremities, and the body senses that because there's less blood going to the brain, and that's a sign of danger. So it also activates that sympathetic nerve system and therefore makes your heart pump faster, makes your blood vessels in your extremities squeeze, because you really want the blood flow to your brain and the heart. In healthy people, when they stand up, the body senses that difference. They get a slightly decrease in blood pressure, they get a slight decrease in oxygenation to the brain, but the body responds pretty quickly to it and therefore regains balance. With people with POTS, this mechanism is not functioning properly. The blood stays in the lower extremities and it doesn't get pumped properly to the brain. The brain senses that as extreme danger and starts discharging more and more adrenaline, and therefore it makes your heart pump even faster because the heart now is trying to compensate this lack of oxygen in the brain. With the heart pumping even faster and less oxygen in the brain, you develop a multitude of symptoms, and that is first, of course, tachycardia, your heart pumping really fast, which can in turn give you shortness of breath and chest pains because the heart is beating so fast it is not really allowing your lungs to function properly. Because it's not compensating, you get dizziness, you may get blackouts, you may get headaches, you get digestion problems, because if you get the system being activated all day long, every time you stand up, it is always, remember, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, because it's always like this. You don't get the hormones and the enzymes and the blood flow to the digestive system to actually digest food. But you are eating, you have to eat. So if your sympathetic system is constantly engaged, you are going to have digestion problems. So POTS can kind of spread in every other organ system of the body, not just the heart. People think that POTS is a heart condition. It is not. It's a dysautonomia. Another aspect of POTS is that for normal people, that pivot is in the center. But with people with POTS, it is off to the side. So when you have an increase in sympathetic, it is huge because the pivot point is here and it takes longer for it to come back. And the more you do this, it kind of starts wiggling even more and more off balance. And eventually it's so at the edge here that you almost get no parasympathetic. So your body is in a constant state of stress. Now, what causes POTS? Well, nobody really knows. There are 3 different categories of POTS. First one is neuropathic POTS, and that refers primarily to damage of those small nerve fibers that would, in a healthy person, detect that change in gravity, that pooling of blood, would activate those blood vessels to squeeze and therefore help the blood to circulate and get back to the brain. It can be a condition on itself as the primary cause, and nobody really knows what causes it. If it is a result of, let's say, if you get a virus and then the virus damaging those nerves, or it could be a genetic component, people don't really know. But it could also be secondary to other conditions such as EDS, diabetes, lupus. Those conditions can actually cause the damage in those fiber nerves. Then we have the hyperadrenergic, okay, I think I got this name. Then we have the hyperadrenergic. Then we have the I cannot say the word, sorry. And that refers to very high levels of hormone epinephrine and norepinephrine, basically adrenaline. When you have a disturbance in this hormone and your body is constantly producing adrenaline, or if you're in a constant state of stress and your body is constantly producing adrenaline, then your body is constantly on a state of fight or flight, or the sympathetic nervous system is constantly activated. Usually this kind of POTS does not involve low blood pressure. The issue is more with the heart rate rather than the nerve fibers that can squeeze the blood. So these people tend to get less blood pooling in the lower extremities, but they just have a lot of issues with the heart. And because the heart is pumping so fast, what happens is the heart does not have enough time to completely fill with blood and get a huge volume to then pump. So when you have a heart rate that is super fast, you get decreased blood volume with each pump and you get decreased force of pump. So even though the body thinks it's a smart thing to do to try to get more oxygen to the brain, it is not really achieving that because each time it pumps, there's less blood and less force. So at the end of the day, it's the same. And then the last kind is the hypovolemic kind of POTS, and that refers to having a abnormal small amount of blood volume. And so if you can imagine, if you have less blood volume in your system, it puts less pressure on the veins and therefore your blood pressure is lower. And when you have a low blood pressure, it is harder to distribute the blood throughout the body. So what are the symptoms of POTS? Because POTS affect every body system, you get so many different symptoms. So primarily, let's say the first thing that people notice is a fast heart rate, so tachycardia, and also a irregular heart rate. Just because it's trying to beat so fast, it can get very disorganized, and that's called arrhythmia. Then you get the shortness of breath and the chest pain. Then you get dizziness, blurred vision, headaches, you can faint. Some people just black out in a sense that they lose their vision, sometimes even their hearing, but they're still conscious. It can cause problems with sleep because that's something that I learned recently. You actually have an activation of sympathetic nervous system during your sleep every time you go into REM phase of your sleep. So every time you're dreaming, you're actually activating the sympathetic nervous system. So if you have a disturbance in that system, you're getting this exaggerated activation of the sympathetic nervous system even when you're sleeping. Even though you're lying down and you don't really get lack of oxygenation in the brain to activate that system, your stage of sleep does. And because your system is so out of whack, instead of doing just a little, which is what in a healthy person would be, remember when I said the pivot is off, it will do this, and you still get those really fast heart rates at night, which makes you wake up completely unrefreshed and exhausted. It can also cause dry eyes, dry mouth, issues with digestion, inability to digest the food, or even when you pass the digestion stage in the bowels, you can either have the food go by too fast or too slow, resulting in constipation and or diarrhea. Increased sweating and hot flashes are also commonly reported symptoms of POTS, and it does make sense if you think about your body being in that constant fight or flight response mode. Let's not forget fatigue, because if you think about when you are running on the treadmill and your heart rate is super high, or you're sprinting for the bus, it's exhausting. The minute you stop, you're like panting and you're trying to kind of catch up with your breath. People that have POTS are in that state all the time. So you can imagine how exhausting that is. So it can create very, very chronic fatigue. And last but not least, brain fog. If there is constant lack of oxygenation in your brain, you can only imagine how difficult it would be to concentrate, to remember things, to make decisions, basically live life. You feel like you're in this constant fog. So what are the tests for POTS? How do you get diagnosed with POTS? Unfortunately, believe it or not, even though it affects how many people? 70 million people in the world, it is still a condition that is not recognized or known by many doctors. Crazy, isn't it? It's unbelievable. But for those doctors who do specialize in dysautonomia, or those specialists who are a little bit more aware of dysautonomia, and that most likely I would say will be a cardiologist, Then there's something called the table tilt test. And basically what that test does is it measures how your body responds to that change in position. So you're strapped to a table and you have a blood pressure cuff on, you have a pulse oximeter on, you usually have an IV in case they need to give you medications, if they need to give you fluids. This test can be done without any medications on your system, or it can be done with a medication that sort of triggers your sympathetic nerve system, and they want to see how your body responds to it. They are measuring your blood pressure, they are measuring your heart rate, and you're reporting symptoms as you go, and they are trying to put a picture together of how your body responds to that change. Then there is a variation of this test, and it's called the active stand test. I like to call it the Postural tilt table test because basically you can do it at home. So you lay down for 5 minutes and you have a blood pressure cuff on. I have one that is connected to my phone, and I lay down for 5 minutes to let my body rest and for my system to get stable. Then I stand up, and then I take my blood pressure again and my pulse, so my heart rate, in 1 minute. And then you do it again at 5 minutes, and then you do it again at 10 minutes. And so you see how your body responds to the longer you stand. Then there's some other tests related directly to your heart that can be done by a cardiologist, and that is an electrocardiogram. And basically that's a test that is measuring your heart's electrical signals. So you have electrode pads that are placed on your chest and your lower extremities, and that's usually a super quick test done in a doctor's office. It doesn't hurt, you don't feel, there's no electricity involved, it's just measuring what your heart is outputting, and it's very quickly. The next one is an echocardiogram, and that is an ultrasound of the heart. That one can take a little bit longer. It can be up to an hour. You may need to lie in some uncomfortable positions, and they're sort of doing a really thorough ultrasound of the heart. Another test that may be done is called a Holter monitor, and that's basically a mobile electrocardiogram. So you have a little device that gets placed on your chest with like a sticky tape, and it records 24/7 your heart activity. And usually there is a little button that whenever you feel sort of any symptoms, you press that button. Every time you press that little button, it's sort of like highlight, because if you think about it, if a cardiologist goes look at your Holter monitor, and if you had it for a week or two, which a lot of people do, imagine the amount of data they have to go through for 2 weeks worth of 24/7 monitoring. So if there is an episode, if there is something happening, you press that button, it sort of highlights and it draws the cardiologist's attention to that particular point in time, and they can sort of analyze and see what is happening there and correlate that to what symptoms you were feeling. So definitely keeping a journal and keeping track of that can be very helpful in working with your cardiologist. And then there's blood tests that can be done, and I think primarily it's just to rule out any other conditions, any deficiencies. Especially the heart is very sensitive to calcium, potassium, and magnesium, and if those minerals are out of whack, then it can definitely affect your heart. So I believe that the blood tests are more to sort of rule out any other conditions, because there is no diagnostic blood test for POTS. Some people also do a stress test, which is you go onto a treadmill and you are told to walk and then maybe run, and sort of like you do different activities, and you're connected with electrocardiogram, and basically they're just looking and seeing how your body responds to exercise or to physical stress. But ultimately, the most important component of diagnosing POTS is a good medical history. So I highly recommend that you keep some sort of file with all your tests, everything that has been done up to date, all your blood work, that you keep track of your symptoms, that you do a few of those active standing tests at home and you keep track of that, that you make a really thorough list of every symptoms that you have and when it started, how long it's been going on for, and all that is really going to help paint a picture. And together with some of all those other tests, it can lead to a POTS diagnosis. So, how do you get rid of it? You may be asking. Well, there is no cure for POTS, unfortunately. Yeah, but it can be well managed. Some people treat or manage their POTS with lifestyle changes or drug-free alternatives, and then other people will use medications to help, especially initially when you're first diagnosed. Some people may go on medication just to get your body out of that super exaggerated response. So hopefully, when I said that the pivot was here, medications will help bring your pivot back to the center, and then you can come off the medications, and then with lifestyle changes help reduce that and keep those two systems a little bit more in balance. Now, as for the drug-free approaches, here are a few things that you can do to help. Elevate the top of your bed. So if you can put a couple of blocks under the headboard of your bed so that your bed is at a slight angle, because the body is not flat all night, because the body is sort of inclined throughout the whole night, it slowly kind of balances itself, and when you stand up, it's not such a drastic difference. Another one is when you wake up in the morning, and that kind of goes with the raising of your bed during the night, is that you don't just jump out of bed. So when you wake up in the morning, first sort of like semi-sit, prop your pillows up in the back and just sit for a few minutes. That's a really great excuse to kind of scroll through your phone, because you need to give yourself at least, 5 minutes in that position, and then I kind of sit upright on the bed for another 5 minutes, and then I get out of bed. I usually do some stretches at this point because I also have fibromyalgia. I'm always in so much pain in the morning, so I need to stretch anyways to be able to move. So I do some stretches in bed, and so that gradual change of position allows your body to compensate a little bit better than a drastic sort of change, if you know what I mean. Increasing your water intake and increasing your salt intake. Now, why is that? Increasing your water intake, it has to be done with salt, because if you just drink more and more and more water, you're just going to pee and pee and pee more. And it's great to get rid of toxins, and it's great to keep your body clean, but what you really want is to retain that fluid. You want that fluid to be converted into blood so that you have a larger blood volume and you have more pressure in your arteries. And salt makes you absorb and retain fluid. So that's why they need to be done together. Adding electrolytes to your drinks is also a good way to help with that, because again, if you're drinking tons of liquid and you're peeing tons, you're actually going to end up diluting your blood and reducing and getting your electrolytes out of whack. And that can be really bad for your heart. So if you're drinking large amounts of fluids, you actually want to add some electrolytes to your fluids. Eating small meals, it's another lifestyle change that you can make, because if you think about when you eat a large meal, then a lot of blood gets diverted to the digestive system. Compression stockings is another technique that you can use. They help compress the lower limbs, and they help prevent that pulling of blood in the lower extremities. Those need to be medical grade compression stockings. I think the recommended is 30 to 40 milliliters of mercury, or I'm not quite sure what the unit is called, but it is the 30 to 41. And it's best that you get fitted for it, because if you just randomly buy one, it can be very, very, very difficult to put it on. I do recommend that you put it on first thing in the morning, because you don't want your legs already to be swollen when you try to put it on. It's going to be almost an impossible task to achieve it. I'm telling you, it is a workout on itself to get those stockings on. Avoiding heat is another lifestyle changes. Why is that, you may be asking? Because heat makes your blood vessels dilate and make them slack, and so therefore makes it harder to get that blood pumping. Other things that you should do is avoid drinking alcohol and caffeine, simply because those are stimulants, and when you have your body already with tons of adrenaline going on, then you don't really need to add to it. And then there is exercise. This one seems to be the most effective treatment for POTS. And before you go like, whoa, wait a minute, how on earth am I going to exercise with POTS? These two don't go together. If your heart rate is already going crazy by just standing up, imagine pairing that with exercise. It's insane. But hear me out. There is something called the Levine protocol, and I hope I'm saying this right. The Levine Protocol is an exercise program specifically for POTS recovery. And basically you start very, very gradually, and you also start from a laying down position. So initially you might be doing the recumbent bike for just like 5 minutes, and then you sort of gradually not only increase the time of exercise, the intensity of the exercise, as well as the position that you exercise in. So over time, it is a program that takes months and months and months. I think it's anywhere between 3 to 8 months, but it does seem from research to be the most effective treatment for POTS. Now, if all the days fail, or if you're at the very beginning of your journey where your POTS is pretty bad and you just want that little bit of a boost, you can use medications. A very common used one is a corticosteroid called, what is it called? Fludrocortisone. So it works by increasing your blood pressure by promoting reabsorption of sodium and therefore increasing water retention. So you really need to use that in combination with increasing your water intake and your salt intake. So this medication is basically trying to increase your blood volume. The second medication is a medication that will help your blood vessels constrict. It's a vasoconstrictor, so makes your blood vessels squeeze. And that is, and I need to read that, alpha adrenergic agonist. A mouthful. Yes, I do remember that from anatomy and physiology and some other lectures in school, but that has been a while. A common alpha adrenergic agonist, did I say that right? Is called midodrine. That's a hard visual to film. Another common medication used is a beta blocker such as propranolol. And this works by blocking the release of the stress hormones, by blocking adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and therefore it has a direct impact on your heart rate. It makes your heart pump a little bit slower and with less force. So hopefully it allows it to fill up a little bit more, but it can cause low blood pressure. This is actually a medication that is very commonly used for treatment of high blood pressure. So if you are one of those people that have low blood pressure with your POTS, then this may not be the best option for you. And then there is intravenous saline infusion, and that's basically having a IV on your arm and having sodium chloride pumped into your veins, and that makes your blood volume increase temporarily. It's not a long-term solution, but it can help you get out of a crisis. It is particularly helpful for those who have the hypovolemic kind of POTS, which is the ones that you have a reduced blood volume. But like I said, it is a very temporary solution unless you're hooked up to an IV 24/7, which brings its own issues. Some people with extreme POTS will have a PICC line to help with that, and that stands for peripheral inserted central catheter. And basically what it does, it gives you access 24/7 to any intravenous infusions. That was a lot of information that we covered today. I hope you find this information useful. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. It really helps the YouTube algorithm understand that this is a valuable video and show it to other people. Leave a comment below if you have POTS or if you are in the process of being diagnosed with POTS, and just tell us what is your best tips and tricks to deal with POTS. Everybody has their own little trick, and share with us, share with the community what works best for you. So this video was more just of a general video about what POTS is, symptoms, treatments, diagnosis, but I will make another video where I talk about my personal story. What are my symptoms? How did I develop POTS? How was I diagnosed? How it affects my life? And what does the future look like for me with POTS? If this is something that you'd like to see, if you'd like me to make a video about my personal story with POTS, just let me know in the comments and I will get going with that video. That is it for now, guys. Ciao e até a próxima!